Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd. I'm Heather Burnt-Santy, and joining the show today is Lizz Nolasco.
Hello.
And maybe her baby. And Bethany Corrie, and definitely her baby.
Hi.
And before I hit record, I said, let's just hit record and see what happens. So it's going to be that kind of an episode. There's the other baby. All right. No one's going to listen to the audio now. They're all going to wait for the video to come out so they can see your babies. Okay, so we're going to talk about working with families is kind of where this is going. I don't have a quote from a book. I have a quote from life. This is the amalgamation of a bajillion different calls and talks with parents. But we're going to talk about when families call, like when I was a center director, and now Liz, you're a center director, and Bethany, you had your family childcare, and probably got some parent calls. But when they call and they say, now, do children learn anything, or are you just like daycare? That kind of question. It comes in different forms. Sometimes it's, do they learn anything with you, or do they just play? Sometimes it's, just flat out, what do you do to teach them to read? Those kinds of things. So that's where we're going to start from. And I'll just say that this is of interest to me because it's something that I have been working on for myself. Even though I'm not a director anymore, I still come across those kinds of questions. And initially, your first reaction, right, is always, oh, for fuck's sake, not this question again. At least for me, it was. And it used to really bother me. And then when I was doing my training to be certified as a critical competencies trainer for 0 to 3, Katrina Makasayat, who led that training, said something like, we were talking about those situations, and she said something like, it's parents advocating for their children's success. And that sort of shifted some things for me and helped me get past that initial inner rage that it was still a question that was coming. So anyway, that's where I'm coming from with this. I'll pause for a minute now and see if you or your babies have anything to add. That's right.
Exactly. Well, I should say, I don't really get annoyed by that question.
Okay, good.
And I don't know if it's because of coming from being a nanny for so long and like getting the, oh, that's your babysitter question all the time.
Okay.
Oh God, he touched something. Okay.
You're still on. Keep
going. Good. And so I don't know when or how, but it just rolls off my back. Like, sure. Like even when I had my own in-home daycare program, like people still called me the babysitter.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, okay, whatever. Like, yeah. And then I would sit on their children just to like,
sure. just to give them their money's worth. Yeah.
I got so annoyed I went to graduate school, so I'm impressed by your
I know, right? I'm once again in awe of Bethany's zen.
Everyone is.
Yeah.
But I think I can also see like the woman said, the parents advocating for their child, because I think there are people who take care of children and they just let them play all day, but like the TV's on and like,
yeah,
they're, watching their soap operas, or, you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
Like I've had those parents recently talk to me, where their kid is just being watched by somebody who has no idea what's going on other than the kids are alive and fed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, it's hard to answer, well, yeah, they just play all day.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Well, I think for me, that's the other part of it is I could just answer that, but then I'm on soapbox level already, and I'm really just having my first interaction with these families sometimes. But I think, well, I'm going to see if Liz has anything she wants to add before I keep going.
She
Sorry,
needs to
yes,
be
I do,
outraged.
but Aurelio
Yeah.
also has things to add. No, I think you might have been the person who shared that quote initially off air, with the idea that parents are really just looking for the best thing for their children.
Yeah.
And we can only combat this idea that children need very specific, often expensive things to learn. So much, we individuals can't necessarily combat the marketing budget of, what is it, VTech or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I think starting in that place of empathy, even if we also have that, I will only speak for myself. I already am starting with that inward annoyance of, what do you think they're doing 24 hours a day?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just being able to step back, remember that anyone wants is the best for their child, and come in from at least a neutral enough place of, oh, that's what's great about brains.
Yeah.
Is learning.
Yeah. And bringing up the VTech budget is so funny, because because it's funny, but also that's part of what I think about now when I am sort of talking myself down from that initial, I'll say fight or flight, because I want to fight about it when that question comes out a lot of times. But so if we think of it in terms of a parent advocating for their child's success, and then, they're asking what they know to ask, it's unreasonable of me to expect that a family contacting me would have the same level of information when they have, since before their babies were born, been receiving messages, marketing messages about what's educational and what's not, and everything has to be quote unquote educational, and every toy should have that on the label, and you should be buying Baby Einstein stuff. I don't even know if that's still a thing. I know they got in some trouble a few years ago, so I don't know if they still sell Baby Einstein stuff, but anyway, I have sort of had to practice stepping into, take a family's perspective on things. Of course, they don't know everything that we have studied to know, and that's not their fault. And what they do know is flawed, often, not always, because of the culture they live in, that we all live in, that says children just, are blank slates, or walking deficits that we need to constantly be improving, instead of just, let's all see if we can figure out child development a little bit, childhood a little bit.
On top of how intensive parenting has become, like just the verb parenting, right?
Yeah.
It's so drastically different than it was a generation or two ago.
Yeah.
And this idea that, just like you said, they're all blank slates, they need to be constantly improved upon. And then, the parents are coming into this with their own schooling experience, right? Their own experience of success or not success in elementary, high school, whether or not they went to college, whether or not they want their child to go to college,
Yeah.
And we've done a great job as an industry of pushing that, early education is important, but we haven't done a great job of defining what early education is.
Yes. And what's so important about it. Yeah. So will you talk more about how the verb parenting has changed? What do you mean?
There are now so many things to do. I mean, I read an article, I wish I could cite it. I will find it and send it to you, about how just the fact that you were a parent, but things you did weren't necessarily parenting, 30 or 50 years ago. Yes.
Uh-huh. That sounds familiar.
Yeah,
it's probably Alison Gopnik. It's probably from The Gardener and the Carpenter or something like that.
Oh, that sounds plausible.
Or something she wrote for The Atlantic. She does that.
Yes, I think you're right. And it's so intensive and all consuming, and every decision you're told to make has to directly benefit your child, not just like the knowledge that it impacts your child, but just that it has to be done in the right way.
Uh-huh.
Benefit your child the right way.
Right.
And there is in fact a wrong way, and it's not just mistreating your child. There's, you can be bad and not know it. So it's just become so intensive, and there are so many experts and coaches and
Yeah.
other people who have come out of the woodwork and carved their niche in this very lucrative industry of telling people what they're doing wrong and screwing up their next generation.
Yeah.
And so it's just this, if you let it, it can become this massively anxiety producing activity instead of just the thing we've been doing pretty successfully for hundreds of thousands of years.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that Heather's I love your stance against parenting books.
Yeah.
Because I love reading parenting books.
Uh-huh.
I have probably spent like the last 15 years just reading like every parenting book I can.
Yeah.
And usually screaming
Yeah.
during most of the reading of it. But I just started reading like Hunt, Gather, Parent or something
Yeah.
like that just came out.
Uh-huh.
And it drives me nuts. Like I love the idea of it, but the whole the language she uses through it is just frustrating.
Oh, okay.
But
Guess we won't have her on the show.
Oh, we could. I'll do an interview with her.
Okay.
Lady, what's your name? I don't even know her name.
I don't either. Anyway, I'm
mystery
sorry.
author.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is just like let your kid help and do things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I haven't finished yet, so maybe she has.
Yeah, maybe
more
she
of a
changed.
message. I don't know.
Maybe there's a sharp change.
Well,
so that's funny that you mentioned my stance against parenting books. It's not all parenting books. But here's my, if anyone is wondering, here's my advice about parenting books. For one thing, if you go into a half-price bookstore and there's a post-it note inside the cover of a book that says "Don't buy this, but buy these instead," I probably left that there. I hope no one from half-price books is listening. But if the book's focus is on controlling or taming or winning the battle, or has that kind of language, then avoid it. If it talks about supporting and understanding, then maybe it's okay. So there you got the nutshell version of what I think about parenting books.
okay, so Heather hates
But also,
parenting
if you
books,
go to
but-
a bookstore and look at the parenting section and just look at the titles, that's all the evidence you need that we have rampant childism
well, and
going on
it's
here.
so overwhelming. Like you have what, 10 friends, you find out you're pregnant and tell people, and 10 friends give you their favorite
Yeah.
parenting book, and this expert is saying, well, start playing classical music to your womb, and like
Which isn't going to hurt the baby.
Yeah,
but it's not
just
gonna,
like all of these things to worry about. And we just did a big across to a different state move. And none of my crap is unpacked, and my baby's playing with like the wooden spoons that I've finally gotten into the kitchen. And he's happier now than when I had the whole daycare set up in my house with every toy and a child could, I mean, not any toy, but with like way more toys than a child.
Yeah.
But it's like parents don't get to see that. They just see like, oh, my friends who have kids, their house is overtaken with all these toys. And I have to get ABC Mouse so that they can start learning.
Yeah. Well, I think this is another way that we've misused, not just as a whole culture, but even within our field and early childhood educators, the brain research about how important those early years are, right? We've used it to instill fear that it can go horribly wrong if you don't get it perfect. But we've also used, it's also makes it sound like, oh, well, then we really do need to cram all this classical stuff and this academic stuff and the worksheets and the educational toys with 7 million lights on them, because heaven forbid we miss this opportunity in these first few years, and how terrifying to be a parent in that kind of a context. You're both
I
muted.
think there's this sense of, I'm sorry, there's a child asking for bubbles. I think there's this sense of needing. So when a parent is asking, are you a daycare or are you a preschool, right?
Yeah.
Or what are the hours my child should be here?
Yeah.
Is one that I feel
Exactly.
like I get sometimes. And it's, I think taking that step back to remember all of the crazy messages that they've been fed.
Yeah.
And then, being able to give the honest answer of, we love it when they're here. They should be here on a, routine basis to be used to us, to build the relationships with us and their classmates.
Mm-hmm.
And also, like, if you're taking a vacation, we're not going to stop you from taking a vacation. Like, spend time with your family. If grandma's in town, you can stay home. That's okay.
Yeah.
And it's not that we don't want to see him, but it's that grandma wants to see him.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. Well, so we're complicit in this too, because I've seen and worked in centers, a lot of them, where parents are scolded if their kids aren't there by 9 o'clock, because 9 o'clock is when the learning starts.
Circle time.
Circle time at 9 o'clock, and then followed by all the other lesson plan stuff. So 9 to 11:30 is when we really want your kids here, or they're missing the benefits of our, whatever program. So I'd forgotten about that, but I'm not surprised they asked that, because if they've been to another center that had those rules, or they've talked to someone.
I had a family recently that they were very family oriented. The parents worked full time, but tried to take like as much time with their child as they could. And it was interesting because it was a full time spot that they had, but the hours were so erratic that it made like they never became part of our group.
Oh, okay.
And so I had never thought before, like I've never had anybody ask, but I've never thought about like, oh, it feels important to me to have kids here like during a certain time. But there is that, I don't do circle time and all that and whatever, but I have found that I value like having a regular drop off time, so that, like that makes my community of the, me and the group of kids flow better.
Right. And that's relationship focused, right? It's not academic focused.
And it's like changing the script, I think, with parents, like, I'll say like, yes, we play all day, and this is what they're learning, and this is how, it doesn't look like us sitting down for a worksheet or sitting down and doing calendar at circle time, but we're looking forward to this event. So that's how we're thinking about time and the passage of time. We don't need the calendar during circle time to do it,
because we're literally experiencing it. I'm getting ready to start another semester, and one of the classes I'm teaching is our curriculum in early childhood class, and I'm very excited about the opportunity to sort of blow apart circle time and calendar time and stuff like that for these students.
It's really interesting in programs that still have like a meaningful circle time. I think people can still see that and be like, oh, well, we should have circle time. And it's like, well, no. If you're still having to force everybody to come and sit down crisscross applesauce, like, we're getting on a different topic.
Yeah, that's a different episode, but we can do that one too sometime. So when I pitched this idea for a show, I sort of framed it as looking at that question and why that question comes up, but then also seeing those times as opportunities to meet parent needs, kind of in the way we think of children. If they have a behavior that's challenging us or challenging for us, we look for the reason, right? We look for the need, we look for what they're trying to communicate, and then that guides our response. So I'm just curious if we can do the same thing with grown-up parents who have these questions and fears.
Yeah, I think that's our job. Like, our job is to take care of children, but
Mhm.
like it's also to like take care of the family too. And they don't, like you said, like they don't know what they don't know. So
Uh-huh.
we need to have a way to talk to them without being like
Right.
angry.
Yeah, yeah. And it's too much for that initial conversation. I don't think that in that first, the first, my specific example of a family calling, looking for care in a center I'm working in and directing or whatever, and asking that question, that's not necessarily the time to try and change minds or teach a lot, but we can, we need to have that answer. Like we need to have something that's expressive of our philosophy and honest when a family's making that decision,
I
and
think
then
being
have
able to draw
a
a
plan.
parallel to adult,
Nope, go ahead.
to adult experiences can also be really valuable.
Uh-huh.
Being able to say like, okay, when you got your job, even if this is something that you trained very specifically for, you took, you went to college, you did whatever to take this job, there were still things you had to learn on the job experientially. So you didn't learn by somebody sitting down and teaching you. You learned because you were faced with something and you had like 75% of the information and you
Uh-huh.
had to gather the other 25%, and you played with it. It may not have felt like playing if you're learning like Excel, but it's still, you're playing with this
Yeah.
information, you're using what you have, you're building on it, and now you can do this new thing. And you
Mhm.
might have used your resources of other people, you might have used books because you're able to read and you're an adult, but you still played with this until you got it right. All we
Mhm.
ask our kids to do.
Mhm. That's a really good, interesting way of thinking about it that I hadn't thought about before. Um, Everybody's muted now because the babies are getting impatient for their mommies.
Uh-oh.
But yeah, being able to put anything that we talk to other adults about regarding children, anytime we can try and put it in an adult context that's more relatable and relevant to their life, I think that's really useful. Just like with children, it needs to be relevant and meaningful in their life if we expect them to be interested in or to want to explore it. We have to do the same thing for families.
Francis agrees.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Francis is my yes man. Been getting lots of smiles.
Can also frame it with what they've already seen their kids do, right? So many preschool programs where I am started to, thanks to licensing, having an infant license that goes up to 2 years old, and then a preschool license that starts at 2 years old. So many preschool programs start at 2 or 2.5. And so it's
Uh-huh.
great to be able to talk to parents who are touring and thinking about preschool for the first time and say, okay, so tell me about a time that your toddler has just stunned you with a word or an action
Oh.
that you didn't know you were teaching them.
Uh-huh.
Because that's all of our curriculum, right?
Oh, yeah.
When your toddler says, excuse me for the first time, because you've said excuse me 17 million times to them, or starts putting the spoon to their mouth or whatever else that you've modeled for them.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing, and that's what their brains are meant to do. And it's not sitting them down and drilling them on spoon skills. It's showing them, offering them the opportunity, and then they pick it up.
Yeah. Yeah. So then, at least some of those parents are going to say, but none of that's valuable for being ready for kindergarten. Like none of that's going to be on the kindergarten screening. So how are you specifically getting them ready for that piece? And again, I have that moment of, and
my blood pressure just ticks up a little bit.
Yes. I have to bring things back to the frontal lobe.
I find it interesting because with that question, I mean, like we have like the kindergarten, like pre-screening, whatever interview that they have to, that I think most places do.
Yeah.
And those are always very academic and, they're having to count and identify words, like words they know or don't know.
And it's right or wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then, in the last school district I was in, several of the teachers that I knew who taught kindergarten, they would post, okay, this is what your kid really needs to know for kindergarten.
Yeah.
And it was all social emotional skills.
Sure.
And so I was like, oh, okay.
Yes.
Screw what everybody else is saying. If the teachers are saying, this is what, I don't care if they can count to 100 or count by fives or can identify 100 sight words.
Hey,
I mean, I knew one program that was her claim to fame, was every kid going to kindergarten knew all of the sight words on the kindergarten sight word
brother.
list. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
oh my
why?
God.
Like, what?
kindergarten sight word lists. Bullshit. Sorry, babies.
Yeah. He's never heard that before.
Yeah.
I can't believe you, Heather.
Yeah, I get,
But-
that's what
but
I
then-
get is
Yeah, it's
kindergarten
like-
teachers who are like, if they can write something that looks close to their name and they can be in a group, then I can do everything else I need to do with them this year.
Yeah, I mean, that's all they need.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting.
And the name one is so easy. I feel like it's so easy to overthink because it's such a big step, but there is no 4-year-old in the world who doesn't want to write their name when they realize that if my name is on this, nobody else can take it.
Right. Yeah, we completely ignore the power of their name to do a lot of the things we think are goals, writing or reading or whatever.
Yeah,
letter
the get out sign.
recognition. Yeah, yeah. Yes, exactly.
No boys allowed sign. What else?
Yes, so
Don't knock
motivating.
this over.
Yeah. Excuse me. So I'm trying to remember how this was posed, but so there's another thing I wanted to run by you both. But I've been doing interviews as part of this, as you both know, process for a book I might be able to write. The jury's out yet whether I can really do it, but I've been doing interviews with parents about the topic of the book. And I was talking to one of the parents who I used to take care of her little boy when he was 1. And now he's giant. But anyway, so we were talking about things like, I was asking them about pressures they felt or messages they got about learning when their children were little. And she shared an example and then asked if I thought that racial privilege falls into this conversation about getting children ready and early academic pressure. And I hadn't thought about it until she posed it. But the idea that, maybe a parent who's been marginalized or wasn't able to pursue, go to college because of structural inequities would feel more pressured to really be focusing on academics from the beginning, and if that would change how we respond.
There is a wonderful bit by fantastic comedian W. Kamau Bell where he talks about looking
Love him.
for his oldest daughter,
Uh-huh.
and he lives in Berkeley, so there are a ton of these beautiful, wonderful play-based preschools. And he said, I'm raising a Black woman. She needs to be smart. She needs to be the top of her class, because if not, she's not going to get that respect. And
Uh-huh.
I'm paraphrasing so badly here,
Wow,
but that was
yeah.
the takeaway from it, right?
Yeah.
And my own experience in various areas with various families has been very, very similar.
Yeah.
There isn't that sense of time for all families that children are going to get there.
Eventually.
There's a much
or,
greater
that's
pressure
that
when you need
answer.
to prove yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like programs that serve underserved communities have that pressure too. Like they
Uh-huh.
can't say that they're just, like Head Start. They
Right.
can't. Anybody who's in Head Start has a play-based philosophy has to fight to get
Yes.
that, so that they can provide the children with what they feel is
Yeah.
of value, because the academics is being pushed down in
Yeah.
that setting too.
So I don't know the answer to this. So now what I'm really thinking about, I don't know, maybe someone listening has a brilliant answer and they'll add it to the comments when we post this or something, but that's real. I don't deny that, and I am privileged not to have had to worry about that when my children were little. But it doesn't change the fact that that's not how children learn, right? That's not how we get them prepared for future academic success always. Some children, sure, if they're showing us that interest, we build on it. So I don't know, that puts me in this circle that I don't know what the answer is. I don't know how I would interact with that parent in that situation. If
So
it
all we
would
do
need
is
to
tear
be
down
different.
systemic racism, and then
Oh, I hadn't thought of that.
right here, you don't even need all the commentary.
I was
Oh my
also
God.
going to say, like, white women aren't going to solve this either.
Liz solves it. I know. That's why, I'm interested in your perspectives because you're on the show with me. But yeah, I guess I need to, here's what I'll say. If you want to be one of those interviewers or interviewees for me to help me with this, let me know. If you have a perspective on this, we'll talk.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I mean, there are programs out there run by, Black, Indigenous, people of color, like that are play based, and
Right.
and so it's it is interest, like, how does that message cross?
Mm-hmm. And how can we help families
Right,
who have that extra intense pressure or fear or just protective urge about their child?
I don't have
I don't
that
know.
answer.
I don't know either. I don't know either. I mean, I know part of the answer is to build relationships with the individual families that we're talking about and listen to their sides and their fears and see where it goes from there. But
It's all about relationships.
yeah, I know. I just was grateful for that mom for bringing that question up to me and giving me something different to think about in this when I'm thinking about this this topic and this process. So I felt like it was important to acknowledge while we were all talking, but yeah, not necessarily have the answer. Yeah. What else can we do? Anything to help meet family needs in this? Thank you. Francis is handing me a paper of his notes.
He has a lot of notes, folks.
Yeah, perfect. Or do you feel like we've wrapped it up?
Can I hit relationship again? Like,
please.
So quickly? I think so much of it is parent history, and this goes to race and class.
Parent what?
Parent history. Their own
okay.
history with school and their experience in the education
yes.
system. So speaking for myself, I don't know. I have a general overview of your school experience and backgrounds, right?
Mm-hmm.
School and I did not get along well. Mm-hmm. I was self-motivated. I taught myself a lot of stuff. I read cool things, but like doing it for somebody else to give me a grade is not my jam. So
shocking.
So being, part of the educational system and yet outside of the educational system and also setting kids up to go into that mainstream educational system for the most part, I have my perspective, and also every day I work, talk to 10 parents who were the exact opposite of me. They could do everything right when they were supposed to. They were able to meet those teacher expectations and like not care about the 15 other interesting things going on. They could just listen to the teacher and learn about biology. So, just knowing the diversity of experiences that each of our families are coming in with, the ones who had to work really hard, the ones who had to overcome learning disabilities to attain that mainstream success, who have that internal pressure that just keeps going because they don't want their kids to struggle the way they did. Or the ones who breezed through school, it wasn't an issue at all for them. And so they would like to set up the exact same environment that they had to replicate their own success for their child. It's each parent coming in with that, do you play or are you a daycare, has such the same and different motivation for it. And they all need those different answers, and being able to have that conversation, which we don't generally have the luxury of the time to have those long conversations with families. But it's huge. And when you can kind of touch on that and make them think, even if they don't divulge their whole last 25 years of their lives to you.
And they may not be aware that memory is what's triggering, they may not have made that connection, and they may have, but I wanted to come back to that and then I forgot. So thank you for bringing it up again, Liz. I think, I don't know. I think that then when we have that question from a family, we ask more questions. We don't even need to have an answer. We just say, like when parents ask me, will so-and-so, will my son be ready for school with the way you're doing things. And I always now say, what does that mean? What does ready for school mean for you? And because otherwise I can go into my spiel, but maybe they're just asking for me to sort of calm them down about that. Maybe they want me to say, you don't have to worry so much about it. Or maybe they do really need to see how this all connects to future school success. And I think we can make those arguments appropriately. We can, we can talk about how the things we do, set children up to do well.
Well, and I
even
think
if we
that,
don't like the system we're sending them to.
yeah, I think part of that is like touching on responsive caregiving. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, with infants, that's an easy
Sell?
thing to note. Yeah, an easy sell, easy thing to notice. Like, they're crying. Okay, let me see what they need.
Yeah, right.
Or
Nope, they need to be in the crib, but they have eaten their bottle 20 minutes ago, and they can cry. They're in the crib.
okay, never mind. Not to those parents, but
Right.
but like, I guess, it could be we're asking questions of the families, but it could also be just letting them know, like, oh, well, will we get to know your child and find out what they need and find out what their interests are, and then we can provide that for them.
Mhm.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if that
Well,
works,
I mean, that comes around to something I love to talk about, which is making learning visible for parents, or
Mhm.
making those connections visible. Because you're right. If we say, well, responsive caregiving with a baby means I pick them up, I hold them, I do what they need. That's easy to observe, easily observable and measurable, really. But some of these other, getting them ready to read, getting them ready for math, whatever those concerns are, the connections are harder to see. And so they're looking with the lens that they have, which is usually their school memory, or the book they read, or what their neighbor's kid did at preschool. So it's another opportunity for us to meet that need, I guess, is to find ways to make those connections visible in ways that they will be comfortable with. Like I've used this example before, but I remember when I was first working in the speech language preschool, I did just like a full bulletin board of photos of children in free play. And then I looked in our Indiana Early Learning Foundation's, standards. And for each photo, I could find one standard that it could be the child was practicing in that play. And I remember my colleague just looking at the whole thing and saying, how did you know that would happen? How did you know they would do these things? It's like, well, it's more about understanding play and trusting play, and then you can make these connections. But so things like that can be helpful for families, but it's in the context of relationship. They've enrolled their children with us. We've gotten through that initial phone call. They're here with us now, and I'm doing whatever I think I need to do to make that more visible to them, so that they can be comfortable and relaxed and just enjoy what's happening with their child.
It's hard addressing that question in that first phone call, especially because, I mean, they know what they want to hear.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah. They probably already have a
a
script that they're hoping we're going to stick with when they ask that question.
Well, and they've heard the horror stories too from their friends who had, the babysitter who watched soap operas all day while they munched on Cheetos.
What a beautiful day.
I know.
Not
that was
for
the kids. The kids were watching soap operas.
Yes, I gotcha. Yeah.
And so, they're trying to figure out, like, how can I find out, like, is this person lazy and going to do work on her scrapbooking at the dining room table all day?
Yeah. Were you there when I was doing family childcare? Were you in my house?
No, it wasn't my house either.
Okay. I mean, I had those things set up. I wasn't doing it when the children were there, but I was definitely had the scrapbooking.
When I heard the scrapbooking thing, I'm going, so if you walk in on me knitting while the kids are playing, are you going to have the same reaction?
Yeah. I was one time I was a toddler teacher with those 1-year-olds, and I was in the classroom and they were all very happily engaged. And I had one little one sitting right next to me, and I was like crocheting while I was watching them and observing. And another teacher from another classroom walked in, opened the door, and she went, "Oh, are we learning to knit today?"
Yeah.
First of all, it's crochet. One hook. But I was like,
I
yeah,
think-
maybe. Like,
I
we're
think
just
every
living
child
together
I've
today.
taken, yeah, every child I've taken care of has wanted to knit at age 4. They're just like, I'm ready. And I'm like, you're not, dude. You can play with the yarn, but you're not ready.
Yeah. Oh goodness. Okay.
That's a different conversation too.
Yeah, it is. We'll do a knitting episode too. So this episode, I should have been writing down all the things that I said were other episodes. But I think this is a good stopping point with this, because your babies are restless. So thank you both, all 4 of you, for being here, making your, well, it's not their nerd debuts, because I'm sure they've both been on screen before. But I appreciate them being here today and being part of this.
Bye.
Goodbye, babies.
You say bye-bye. Oh, bye,
Yep,
sweetie.
there's a little bye.
Bye.
All right. Thank you all for listening or watching, whichever one you're doing here. And I hope you come back again next week for another episode.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi.